Today, I'm going behind the scenes of one of Britain's most famous heritage railways, at the personal invitation of a subscriber. This once humble local transit has the distinction of being the first preserved steam railway in the world, and for such a tiny line, its lore runs as deep as the love rail fans have for it. But why was this railway the first to be preserved? What does the future hold for it? And how is it connected to a certain little blue tank engine? The only way to find out is to go for a ride. This is the Talyllyn Railway. It's located on the west coast of Wales, the smallest of the three countries making up Great Britain, and its terminus and main station can be found in the coastal town of Tywyn. Here, one can jump off a Transport for Wales DMU from Birmingham, England, separate trip report on my channel, and walk just a short distance to board the little railway. It was also here, where the narrow gauge tracks approached the standard gauge ones, that the Talyllyn Railway once exported slate, its primary commodity, to the main railway.
The wharf here was a rail-to-rail transshipment, so from the narrow gauge wagons the slate was transferred to standard gauge. And you've got the main line and a siding now. We're putting back an interpretation of the original line that was I think it was ripped up in the 1980s sometime around then, but we're putting a bit of trap that in there. We've got a wagon, standard gauge wagon, to go on the piece as well, to kind of just show people how that interchange worked.
From Tywyn, the Talyllyn travels 7¼ miles inland to Nant Gwernol, where trains used to pick up wagons full of slate for transport. Today, there are various stations and halts along the line, including Pendre, home to the railway's equipment sheds, which I would be exploring later, and Awdry, where all trains make an extended stop on the return journey. Many of the other stops serve tourists to this part of Wales, and are by request only. The railway itself has a track gauge of just 2 feet 3 inches, meaning these trains are fairly small. If you want some scale for how big this thing actually is, I'm about 6 feet tall, and I come up pretty far on it. Our motive power for this ride was engine number 1, Talyllyn, looking great for being 160 years and 1 day old. This locomotive was built in 1864 by Fletcher, Jennings and Company, and it shares its name with the railway. I would be riding an open-air carriage number 13. Admittedly, not a lot of people are riding in the open-air car today. For pretty obvious reasons, it's very cold and rainy, but I like you guys, so I'm gonna get the best footage possible. Adam has a sandwich. How's your sandwich?
Moist.
The train set out, rumbling under a bridge and through a narrow valley to Pendre, home to the carriage and locomotive sheds for the railway. We would be back there in a bit for a tour. Then we were passing through a level crossing and into some seriously beautiful farmland. Besides hauling slate, beginning in 1865, the Talyllyn Railway started carrying passengers in 1866, using just 5 carriages and 2 locomotives named Talyllyn and Dolgok, the latter of which we passed going up the hill. No further locomotives or passenger equipment were added prior to preservation in 1951. 4.9 miles in, we pulled into Dolgok Station, which, like most stations along the railway, was made up of slate dug out from the quarry nearby. It was here that Talyllyn got a nice long drink of water. After this, the line stretched along the edge of a valley. Pro tip, sit on the left side of the train heading out and on the right side heading back for the best views. We passed Tywyn, one of the railway's work diesels, then climbed ever further, winding our way into the woods. If you're enjoying this ride, do consider subscribing, and if you've been around here for a while, consider joining my Patreon to keep the adventures going. So how did this little line become the first preserved steam railway in the world? Well, it went something like this. Alright boys, times are tough. Let's start quarrying that slate right over there. You mean the slate in the quarry's support pillars? Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? So your main commodity and primary source of revenue is now gone, so do we still get trains? Well, I suppose so. I'll keep this little railway running for you guys as long as I'm alive. Well then. Thankfully, it was around this time that a group of individuals became interested in continuing the line's operation for its historic value, rather than sheer practicality. After Jones's death in 1950, his widow agreed to hand over the railway to the group, who opened it as the world's first heritage railway in May 1951, less than a year after original passenger services had ended. For some perspective, in 1951, the Strasbourg was still a declining freight short line, the future Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad had one passenger train a day at night and was pretty much only freight other than that, and the Durango and Silverton had introduced tourist trains but still operated as a branch of the D&RGW. Much of what the Talyllyn's preservationists did, such as the creation of an organization to own and oversee the line for preservation purposes, having a largely volunteer workforce, yes, including this guy, catering primarily to tourists, and acquiring far more rolling stock than the railway ever had before preservation in order to carry these tourists, set the pattern for subsequent railway preservation in the UK and around the world. The line crossed an active road with a rather odd-sounding crossing signal. Then we arrived at Nant Gwernol, the line's terminus. Now it was time for Talyllyn to pose regally for the handful of railfans with cameras, then run around the train to pull it back down the hill.
Thank you.
One noisy signal later, we were pulling into Abergynolwyn, the original terminus of passenger services, and now an extended stop on all passenger trains. While many passengers headed into the station house for food, Adam took me into the signal box, or as it's known on this railway, the block post. So I'm going to try using the token system that they use to keep track of where different trains are. So hypothetically, if I was driving the train down from the top station, I would be carrying this yellow metallic token key thing. What's the technical name for it?
Token.
Token. Okay. So it's got this little latch on the end, and then put it in the token machine.
Well,
Is that right?
ding the token machine first to check the one at the other end's closed.
Oh,
Push and hold. And then release. There you go. Goes ding. Now put the token in.
Alright.
Just drop down on those channels. Yep. And now ding the bell again, and it should set to line clear.
And if I was actually driving, then I'd get one of the green tokens over there, and then proceed on down the line with various tokens of various forms. Adam also let me have a go at throwing switches, or should I say, points. So I throw this one first.
Yes.
Here we go. And then this one.
Then that one, yeah. And then that will catch out, yeah.
I quickly swung by the cafe after this fascinating demonstration, just in time to buy some carrot soup, but I didn't have quite enough time to eat it before the train left, leading to the coziest vibe shot I've ever taken. And one spoon I never got around to returning to the railway. Good doggos ride the Talyllyn Railway. Did I say that right?
Yes. Doggo is pronounced doggo.
I thought it was dogok.
That's where we are.
And speaking of dogok, or rather dolgok, we ended up passing that engine once again. Back at Pendre, Adam and I jumped off, and we watched the train pull away back to Tywyn. From here, Adam took me into the coach shed, where we met back up with Luke. Do note that the remainder of this video will have flickering lights because I don't know how to use my GoPro. I got to explore a carriage that Princess Diana rode in part to make my Diana-obsessed wife a little jealous, and I checked out van number 5, the railway's original guards van. 2, please.
It's all printer's type. You've got every month of the year, a load of 1s and a load of 2s, because that's the most common year numbers, and then every other possible bit of date, and some spaces as well. And we'll get out of 2. 25, not 52. And September. Put them back up in there. Now wind this thing here to pull some fresh inked fabric through. Fold the whole thing back over again. If you'll present me with your ticket, please.
Okay.
And then put the end I want to stamp in there. And there you go. I've managed to set it to the 52nd.
You can see in the windows, because the panes of glass are original still, you've got people signing their names in just 1921, 1932, 1916, and the other one down there, there's 1915.
Then it was on to the Loco shed.
Quick health and safety thing, don't fall in the hole, too much paperwork, don't trip over anything, too much paperwork. Yeah, please don't die.
Here I got to meet engine number 4, Edward Thomas, which was brought on from another railway in the early days of preservation. After seeing a couple of diesels, we headed over to another shed housing number 3, Sir Hayden.
Wait, this is the one that was banished to the Shadow Realm, right?
We also paid a visit to number 7, Tom Rolt, which was built only a few years before I was. Now, if any of the engines and trains in this video seem oddly familiar, like maybe you watched them on a cozy television show as a kid, that's because the Talyllyn Railway is inextricably linked to the Railway series by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry, a series of children's books best known for one of its lead characters. You might have heard of him. He's called Thomas the Tank Engine. The Reverend Awdry was a longtime fan of the Talyllyn preservation effort, and he volunteered at the railway over multiple years, starting in 1952. He also created an entire fictional clone of the Talyllyn on Thomas's island of Sodor, called the Skarloey Railway. Many of the stories about the Skarloey in Awdry's books, and later in the TV show based on it, were in turn inspired by real events on the Talyllyn. And over the years, Talyllyn engines have been decorated as their Skarloey Railway counterparts for events.
So here you can see the winnings of our war against the sentient locomotives. Here's some of the faces we used. The events, some of them are quite old now, dating back to the 1980s, which is, this is Rusty's new face, and we've got Duncan as well, which has got his signature frown, and then Peter Sam's nice and happy up there. We don't talk about him.
One of Ivo Hughes' faces has a broken nose from where it encountered my head.
Oh no!
To honor the Reverend's legacy, a replica of his study can be found in the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum next to Tywyn Station, complete with many of his original belongings. And since I asked very nicely, I had the unusual privilege of stepping inside this exhibit.
The room's a lot smaller, and if you talk to the family, not as messy as it should be. But it's a really close replica to the study, including the map on the wall, which was mounted above the fireplace, exactly like this. And this map of Sodor actually dates to 1950, and it was done by P.R. Wickham with the publishers as a gift to Reverend Awdry, and you can actually see where the Reverend, as he's been writing the books, has gone in and added extra railway lines and extra location name stickers.
So yes, in case you didn't know, the Thomas the Tank Engine author was into Tolkien-level world building, or rather, world building if Tolkien was a hopeless train nerd. It was truly surreal to be standing next to the typewriter where train stories I'd loved as a boy first came to life, and I'm incredibly grateful to the museum and the railway for that opportunity. Looking around the Reverend's study, it was clear that this man really loved trains, just like Luke and Adam, the other railway volunteers I met, the passengers I rode with, the people who saved this railway from abandonment, and the railway's last owner before preservation. And I guess that's why it makes so much sense that the Talyllyn was the first preserved heritage railway. It was surrounded by people who cared about it and what it stood for, and who wanted to see it grow and thrive. Every enthusiast comes to railroading for a slightly different reason: to write children's stories, make YouTube videos, or just take in a steam engine going chugga chugga choo choo. But when we come together, we can take those shared passions and create something truly wonderful. The Talyllyn is proof of that.
We're currently having a big project, a big redevelopment project for around Pendre. There's a lot of operational constraints. We don't have enough space for everything. You know, the diesels have to live outside. We've launched the 75 appeal as we're approaching 75 years of being the world's first preserved railway, and we're aiming to raise £500,000 over the next so many years to aid the redevelopment project, and it will just really help transform Pendre as a whole and other elements of the railway. It will also fund a new volunteer hostel that can be used for volunteers wanting to stay, so we've got more accommodation, basically, more people can come and help. You can find all the details on the Talyllyn website about that, but what I would say is the fundamentals here will stay the same. This will always be the Loco shed, it always has been, and it's about protecting that heritage but also making sure we've got the right facilities and tools to keep it for the next 75 years.
Special thanks to Luke and Adam for this tour, for inviting me to the railway as a media guest, and for helping fact-check this script. Be sure to check out the Railway's website and YouTube channel in the description below. And take care.